All right, so we are counting down to the key moment as the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be hosted at the White House for a state dinner by the Bidens. The Indian Prime Minister, remember, a little while back took the center stage in the heart of America's democracy in a rare honor, demonstrating the deepening India-US ties. The Indian Prime Minister made a second address to the US Congress. Now, these are live visuals that are being beamed straight out of the White House in Washington, D.C. In some time from now, the Indian Prime Minister will be hosted by the Bidens in what is being at this moment dubbed as a state dinner for the Indian Prime Minister. And for the first time in recent history, what is interesting is that the White House will be hosting this state dinner that is entirely going to be plant-based. So there will be no meat, there will be no dairy, and there will be no eggs as part of the menu. And that's because the Indian Prime Minister is, of course, a strict vegetarian, although it is not clear as to why there is no dairy products in the menu that is going to be served. The dinner will, of course, see 400 VIP guests who will be in attendance. And this, of course, is going to be one of the key aspects of the Indian Prime Minister's visit in Washington, one of the most high-stakes diplomatic tours of the Indian Prime Minister to strengthen ties with the United States. So some pretty important big dignitaries are making their way in for the state dinner. And Nina Curtis, the chef, the White House has said that the menu has been curated to showcase the best of the American cuisine that's been seasoned with Indian elements and flavors. This is, of course, what has been said by Nina Curtis, the chef at the White House, who's been brought in as a guest chef for the dinner. Now, Curtis is, in fact, specializes in plant-based cuisine. And she's, in fact, gone on to state, and I quote her here, throughout her culinary career, she's witnessed the remarkable power that food has on people, saying that the menu for the state dinner allows guests from both countries to experience something of the other's culture. So the dignitaries are, of course, walking in for the state dinner, quite a few of them. And now, remember, this is going to be an extraordinary sort of a state dinner. Now, at this moment, there are no specifically Indian dishes on the menu. Many Indian spices and flavors, however, have been incorporated. The first course will include a salad that will be made with marinated millet, grilled corn and compressed watermelon with an avocado sauce. That is what has been reported. The main course in this dinner will be stuffed portobello mushrooms with creamy saffron-infused risotto. This is what has been reported. The dessert in the state dinner will be an Indian spice take on American classic, which is a rose and a cardamom-infused strawberry shortcake. So in a short while from now, the Bidens will be hosting the Indian Prime Minister for an official state dinner in which 400 other people will, of course, take part. So you can, of course, look at all the people who are, in fact, making their way in for the official state dinner that has been readied for the Indian Prime Minister as a part of the proceedings. Many celebrities, many business personalities, politicians, amongst others, are, of course, making a beeline for the seat of power in the United States of America. These are live visuals that are being beamed straight out of the White House. And also, what is interesting in the state dinner is if the guests were to so desire, then they can request fish, a sumac roasted sea bass, along with crisp millet cakes and summer squashes. The wine options include a red blend from an Indian-owned vineyard in the Napa Valley in California. That's another little bit of an interesting detail that's been put out. Now, millet is going to be the main feature in the menu. And this is a nod to India's efforts to make 2023 the year of the millet, is what the White House has now officially said. The White House occasionally invites guest chefs to help plan state dinners. And just to give you a brief of how this process is done, back in the month of April, when the South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol had visited the White House for a state visit, First Lady Jill Biden had brought in Edward Lee, who is a Korean-American chef with restaurants in Washington and Louisville, as a key guest chef. And this time round, it is Chef Nina Curtis, who specializes in vegan food, who has, of course, been brought in for this special state dinner, which is going to be, of course, be hosted by the Bidens, in which the Indian Prime Minister is, of course, the key invitee. And also to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is to be expected and what has happened so far as a part of the state visit by the Indian Prime Minister, we're being joined by Ms. Elizabeth Braw. She's joining us from London. She's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And we also have Siddhant Simal, who's joining us live from the White House. But Ms. Elizabeth Braw, let me in fact begin with you. This of course has been such an important visit by the Indian Prime Minister to the United States. It's his first official state visit, and the importance of this visit has been underlined by the statement that the American president in fact made in the lawns of the White House, where he said that this relationship between India and the United States is the one that will define the 21st century. Why do you think the Americans are placing such importance on this relationship with India?
We are in the midst of a massive geopolitical realignment. The system that the world built up over the past 3.5 decades is crumbling, and that system was the inclusion of China and Russia in the global system, and the immense focus on China in particular as a political and especially trading partner. Now all of that is deteriorating and in some cases crumbling, and that means that for political and economic reasons, Western countries, including the US, have to look to alternatives, and India has been a runner-up to China all this time, and now it's emerging as the top contender to replace China as the top partner, trading and political partner for the West.
Absolutely, indeed. Do continue to stay on to this, Ms. Elizabeth Braw. Meanwhile, we are looking at visuals that are being beamed straight out from the White House in the United States, and we are expecting the Indian Prime Minister to make his way back into the White House again. Now, remember, this has been a crucial visit. The Indian Prime Minister a little while back also addressed the joint sitting of the American Congress, where he stressed upon how this relationship between the United States and India is so important. He also said that the time for war is over. This is not the era of war. He also insisted that peace and negotiations and talks is the only way forward. The Indian Prime Minister there being hosted by the Bidens, received by the Bidens at the entrance of the White House. And this, remember, is going to be such an important visit, which is, as has been said through the day and through the night, is in some ways, the United States is, of course, looking for new allies, and it is now looking at India as a key partner in taking on a belligerent China, because the geopolitics of the region and indeed the world has changed in the last decade and a half. The rise of China has made a lot of things very, very interesting, and the United States is, of course, looking at India as a reliable partner in taking on a very belligerent China. And my colleague Siddhant Simal is also joining us on this broadcast. Siddhant, we just saw the Indian Prime Minister arrive at the White House there. He was received by the Bidens, and we expect the state dinner to begin in a few moments from now. But, you know, the optics of what's in fact played out since this morning in Washington, D.C. just goes on to highlight about the importance that the United States now places on India. Initially, when the Indian Prime Minister was set to leave, a lot was being talked about in terms of how the United States want to see India as an important defense partner, where the defense relationship was expected to grow. But this is much more comprehensive than that.
All right, we're going to need to move. Okay. Well, Mohammed, actually, we now need to move from this location. So we will be now moving from this location to the dinner is Behind me, this was the place where the Indian Prime Minister was welcomed by the US President. But essentially, a lot of movement today from the entire area, whether it's White House, whether it's the Capitol Hill. And now, of course, the dinner commences. It will be a vegetarian dinner first. Secondly, millets will be given. Now, we know that India has been focusing on millets. This year is being marked as the year of the millets, and essentially the focus will be as to how there can be the informal meeting for the leaders to engage with themselves and who's who of the people who have arrived here.
Absolutely, indeed, Siddhant. We'll, of course, come back to you in just a bit. But Ms. Elizabeth Brough, if I can bring you in on this. What is, of course, interesting is not just the optics, but also the subtext of what's, in fact, been playing out at the White House. The American president, not mincing words there, stating that this is a relationship that will redefine the 21st century. He also described this visit by the Indian Prime Minister as a point of inflection. I want you to weigh in a bit about how Europe, of course, views the changing geopolitics, especially in East Asia. Especially countries such as France and Germany, they have a different approach on how they would like to engage with China. But the United States has a completely divergent opinion on how China needs to be engaged with, which is what has prompted this realignment on the part of the Americans. What do you have to say for that?
It's certainly true that the shift in the US in its views towards China has been much faster and much more radical than views in Europe. But we should also remember that it's not just about the views among politicians and political decision makers. It's also the views among ordinary citizens and the business community, because the relationship with China is not just about political relationship. It's all encompassing, and what we have seen in the business community is both in the US and in other countries is business leaders becoming very concerned about the risk of doing business in China and trying to reduce their exposure to China. Businesses from all over the Western world. And on top of that, what we have also seen, we are seeing at the moment, an incredible change in public views, attitudes towards China across the Western world, and not just the geographical West, but countries like Japan, Australia, New Zealand as well, where the public in those countries are becoming developing very strong doubts about China and whether that countries should be closely aligned with China. So that, I think, is that too contributes to this essentially becoming India's moment. There are so many people that have concerns about China, and India is essentially there waiting in the wings to take over China's leading role in the global economy and indeed in the global system.
Absolutely, indeed.